Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm so glad you could stop by and you're taking the time to listen to my arts podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode. I speak with Peter Holsapple of the band the dB's. And the first big question that I had asked myself was, where have you guys been all these years? They were a tight, great band in the early 1980s. This was pre REM. Think about that period. So it was between punk rock and the start of that era of new wave and bands like REM. In fact, one of their producers went on to produce REM. But anyway, the ZBs just released their first two albums that were from 1981 and 1982, respectively. And it's just really a gem that has been unearthed. It's just really amazing. I don't know where these guys have been. They were very big overseas back in the day, back in the UK, but they couldn't get the traction that they really deserved here in the US. There was a following here, of course, but it was far bigger in the UK, Australia, places like that overseas. It's really amazing to see a band like this that is from America, in fact, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and they formed in the late 70s and went over to New York and were big on the scene there at places like CBGB's. And they really formed as a really great unit and put together two great albums. The first one is called Stands for Decibels. They had just released that, re-released, shall we say, and remastered, of course. And then the second one is called Repercussion from 1982, and that is coming out in October as I speak. This is September 16th. This is coming out in a little less than a month. Great album as well. I highly recommend it. And also some new videos came out to promote these projects. So really, really great, amazing music here. And we really get into that. Peter is just a fountain of musical knowledge. Great to speak with. And I'm just looking forward to seeing them as I speak. I'm going to be seeing them at a place that I like to talk about a lot. It's called Eddie's Attic right here in Decatur, Georgia. It's a great room, and I highly recommend anybody who's in the ATL or anybody who visits the ATL to go check out Eddie's Attic. Anyway, September 16th, a great day, beautiful morning, isn't it? Come on, folks. It is also known, this is a day, and I like to kind of commemorate because every day there's something special. And this one's called Preservation of the Ozone Layer Day. I remember that was a very big thing. Preservation of the ozone layer was like a very, very big political hot topic many years ago. We haven't talked about the ozone layer in a long time. Maybe it's, I don't know, I hope it's kind of preserved itself, but there's still a day for it and preservation of the ozone layer day. So watch where you're using all that hairspray. I guess that kills the ozone. Remember, we used to talk about that all the time. Anyway, off topic there, but I kind of like to juice these things up a little bit. Anyway, Peter is a great guy. He was speaking to me from North Carolina, Durham to be specific, a cute little town there. And I really enjoyed my time speaking with him, and I really look forward to their show. The dB's stands for decibels, is the first album, and the next one is called Repercussion. Get it wherever you get your music. He would probably prefer you go get the vinyl with all the beautiful artwork and everything that comes with it, but it's also available digitally, and you can get that wherever you get your music. I love Amazon Music. A little plug there. And the first album's already been on there. I was listening to it just now. So enjoy. Good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me join you.
Absolutely. So great to see you. Where are you recording from this morning?
Well, I am in my home studio known as the Hit Shed in beautiful Durham, North Carolina. I'm going to turn this overhead light off because it's
Yeah, I know any of those
it's,
backlights
it's a bit
kind of
much. So
kind of
there we
throw
go.
you off there. Very
Hey,
good. Excellent. Yeah, good lighting. I like that. Yeah, Durham is really cool. I visited many years ago and went around the area to Duke and places like that. And never ending good eating there. The North Carolina barbecue is, if you're into that. I don't really
I
eat very
am.
much.
It's not part of my regular diet, but it certainly is something that I like to eat from time to time. Um, what were you doing down here, and where are you?
I'm in the Atlanta area.
Okay.
I'm in an area called Peachtree Corners. They incorporated here about 12 years ago. There's been like this trend to take these areas and incorporate them.
Yeah.
And Peachtree Corners is near Norcross, and where you guys play at places like Eddie's Attic, that's in Decatur, so it's not terribly far from there.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, Durham, I love it there. And there was a place in the morning I went for a really nice breakfast in Durham, a
Wise
part of a
or
story.
Elmo's?
Elmo's. It was Elmo's.
Elmo's, the family restaurant. Yes.
Very nice.
They had another location in Carmel, which is I guess where Merge Records got their start. Or no, sorry, Mammoth Records. We'll go way back. Mammoth
Ah,
Records, the Ferris label. And but that location apparently is closed. But the Durham one is still around. It's on Ninth Street, and it's great breakfast place. This town needs more breakfast places. It needs a place downtown, is what it really needs for breakfast. But
yeah, nothing like
maybe
going
in my
there
maybe
and
in my dotage, I can be a restaurateur.
well, later on, if you remember, Michael Stipe ended up doing that in the Athens, Georgia area.
Yes, the grit,
Yeah,
good
yeah.
food. Is that place still open?
I don't think so. I haven't been to Athens in ages either. It's been a
Mm,
long time. Place called Guaranteed as well. I don't know if he was a partner in that one too,
don't
but
know
that
that
was
one.
years and years ago in Athens. Another great music scene, but you are from the Winston-Salem area. And
I am.
what was life like growing up then? I'm just discovering you guys, and I'll go in a little bit of that. Winston-Salem. What was influencing you as you were growing up, and what did you get into? And are you self-taught or did you get professionally trained?
Not the locale you might expect for music, but Winston-Salem has a long, strong musical history. There was a band called the Five Royales with Loman Pauling that were from there, a rhythm and blues group that were really groundbreaking. They had a song called "Dedicated to the One I Love," which you know from the Shirelles and from the Mamas
Mhm.
and the Papas. And then they also had a song called "Think" that was a James Brown hit. And they a few years ago they put out this what is it called? Shout and Swagger, I think maybe, and it's a 4 CD set of all of their stuff. It's remarkable. So that's before my time. My family moved from Connecticut in 1962.
Wow.
My dad was working with Wachovia Bank at the time. But growing up, we had a couple of really good uh, AM radio stations. One was a good guy station like WMCA in New York, but it was WTOB in Winston-Salem. And we had we had the good personality jocks. We had a guy named the Flying Dutchman, whose real name is Pete Barry, who is actually still alive. And he was very cool. Another guy named Dick Bannock, who ended up hosting Shock Theater on WGHP on Saturday nights as Dr. Paul Bearer. And so we had a good, I mean, I'm 68, so you have to think about the time of like the early to mid 1960s with radio, even but slightly before the Beatles, but the playlists were all, it wasn't just Beatles and Dave Clark Five and the Kinks. It was also Buck Owens, and it was
Yeah.
James Brown, and it was Aretha and the Staple Singers. We heard a really great cross section of music there, and that's sort of before music went underground. Also, we had the local college station at Wake Forest, WFDD, that was mostly classical, but at night around 11, they had Deacon Light. And so they would play, this is like late 60s, and they would start playing, progressive rock. We also were able to get Clear Channel radio from uh, Chicago. This is Clear Channel before it became a brand, but Clear Channel was like really high wattage radio stations, and WCFL was the station that we would get on Sunday nights, Ron Britton's Subterranean Circus. So we would get to hear all sorts of very cool stuff there. And we were sponges, We had older guys that played in rock bands around town, a group called the Teen Beats that all dyed their hair red, beat as in beats. And it was just a great place to grow up. Lots and lots of bands. When I got a little bit older, I would start going to the kiddie shows on Saturday mornings at the local theaters. One is the Carolina Theater, which became the Stevens Center. That's what it is now. But they would, my wife, who's considerably younger, was like, "You mean to tell me your mom and dad would drop you off at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning with a $5 bill and pick you up at noon and unsupervised?" And I was like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
And so we'd see a movie, we'd see like a hot rod movie, and they'd have bingo. But they most importantly, they'd have local bands. They'd have teen bands like the Satans, or I'm trying to even think of some of the other ones that played there. But I couldn't quite get the fact that they were doing sort of the same thing that the Beatles were doing on Ed Sullivan, but it was a different kind of thing. I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
couldn't quite make that leap of consciousness until eventually I did. And but Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. Mom had a guitar. I picked it up, started learning to play, brought it to school, played for my friends, had little bands with two acoustic guitars and a drummer with a snare drum and a cymbal sticking off the side. And we played Beatles and we played Lovin' Spoonful and really had a great old time, but it became more and more evident to me that that was what I really wanted to do. And when I became a teenager and I was seeing bands that, like, Mitch Easter was a member of a group called Sacred Irony that was really
Cool.
just extraordinary. And they were playing their own songs, they were writing their own songs, but they were also drawing from a very deep well of groups like Spooky Tooth and Blood Rock and the Easy Beats. And so it was like I realized somewhere along the line that, you know, the top 40 stations were really a great springboard because, we loved Paul Revere and the Raiders. We
Yeah,
loved the Kit
yeah.
Kats. We loved the Bubble Puppy, all that sort of stuff that they were playing. But it also reminded me that there was other stuff out there and that we had to start writing our own stuff. So I started writing in earnest probably when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And then, the other thing about being in a band scene like that is the other bands come and see you. So you need to learn the songs right, because if you don't, they'll call you on it.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And growing up, how did your band get together? And you've been together for decades now.
Well, the dB's actually didn't get together as a band until we'd all moved to New York in 1978. Um, Chris and I had played together in a band in 1972 called Rittenhouse Square. And we had cut a record. Mitch Easter was the other guitar player, and we had a drummer named Bobby Locke. And we went into a studio in Greensboro called Crescent City Sound Studios and cut a record. We cut 6 songs, and our drummer pressed it up. And I like to always say that it's a record that's considered a collector's item by people who haven't actually heard it. And it really is not a great record, but it was,
Hmm.
it was kind of interesting at the time. It just was, again, it was a kind of a proving ground for us to figure out how to do it. So we had played together, and then Will Rigby, the drummer, had played in a group in high school after I left Rittenhouse because it became evident that we weren't going to be playing out very much anymore. But had a group called Little Diesel with a friend of ours named Bob Northcott, who was he was sort of the Lenny Bruce of Winston-Salem for us. He was a kind of a guy that turned us on to a lot of music that we wouldn't have ordinarily found, and he was scatologically perfect. And it just you got to have a guy like that in high school, I think. So
Always. Yeah.
so that was kind of cool. Um, you know, um, and so by the time by and then eventually in 1976, Chris was at UNC Chapel Hill, and he started a band. He had a band called Sneakers, and that was a band that had Will playing drums and Mitch Easter played guitar. And there was a bass player named Robert Keeley, who was another one of our classmates, and another guitar player named Rob Slater. And they cut a 7-inch 33 and a third 6-song EP.
Hmm.
And it was one of the first DIY records of the time, and it got a certain amount of attention from places like Trouser Press magazine and various record collector magazines. So that kind of paved the way for Chris to move to New York. And Chris, somewhere along the line, again, around 1972, Chris heard a song called When My Baby's Beside Me on the radio on WAIR, which was the other top 40 station. And that was by a group called Big Star. And that was that was the first single from from number one record. And it was back when the label actually had radio promo in place with their distribution by Stax. So in retrospect, it's sort of not surprising that he heard it. It didn't really burn up the charts at all, but Chris was excited and we were excited when we heard it. And Will drove to Raleigh to find the first album. And we just, little by little, it became evident that that was sort of our spirit animal band. We really liked them so much. They were playing the kind of music that we could absolutely relate to. It wasn't the other side of Winston-Salem was the fact that it was a big Allman Brothers town, a big Marshall
Yeah.
Tucker town, big Leonard Skinner town, all things Southern rock. And
Yeah.
that was fine, but it just wasn't really blowing our skirts up. We really much preferred stuff like Big Star and Badfinger and the Raspberries.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so by the time went to New York, he started playing bass for Alex Chilton, who was one of the
Yes.
leaders of Big Star.
Yeah.
And he played with him for a couple of years. Then Alex moved back to Memphis, and Chris decided he was going to start something up. So he got in touch with Gene Holder, another one of our friends from Winston-Salem, who was living, I think, in Philadelphia at the time. And he got in touch with Will, who was in Chapel Hill, and asked them to move up to New York. And I was living in Memphis and trying to figure out what the magic of Big Star was and not really figuring it out. And then I got a call from Will saying, "You want to come up and audition for this band that Chris has called Chris Stamey and the dB's?" And I'm like, "Sure, absolutely,"
Cool.
because I kind of wanted to live in New York too. So came up, auditioned, and I presume that I got the gig. That was like 1978. We started playing. We started recording demos. Um, the record that has come out this year stands for Decibels. It was a record that we started recording probably late 1979, early 1980, but we had to record it in fits and starts because a it was a finance issue. We weren't doing it
Sure.
for anybody in particular. And so those were the days when recording studios were, $150 an hour. So fortunately, with a little bit of spirit, a little bit of experience in the recording studio world, we knew that we had to be rehearsed, we had to be ready, we had to have the arrangements figured out. We couldn't really dick around too much with the clock run.
Sure.
So that's what we did. So we did pieces at a time with that record. But then we couldn't get a deal in the States for whatever reason. It was the days of the Knack. There were some great bands that were getting signed. 2020 got signed to Portrait Records. Paul Collins Beat got signed to Columbia or Epic, I think. And we didn't feel like we were all that different from those bands, but apparently we were different enough to not warrant a recording contract. So the nice folks at Albion Publishing, who had given me
Right.
and Chris a publishing deal, said, "Well, we could put it out too." So we put it out in England, and it came out in England and Europe and in Australia, but not in the States.
That's
And
wild.
it was a little depressing, honestly, because
Yeah.
we didn't see that we were all that different, and we really wanted to play. And you had to have a record out to promote. So here we are trying desperately to do this, and we got radio airplay, but the reason we did that was because these wonderful people who had bought our records on import at stores in the Northeast and in the Southeast um, brought their personal copies to the radio stations at colleges and played it. And so we got a little bit of traction with it there. And that was great. And we had people like Meg Griffin playing it on her Saturday morning show. We had, we sort of had a single of the week at one point with a song called Black and White.
Right.
And so there was attention being paid. It just wasn't a really concerted effort because there was no label in the States to do it. Simply put.
Yeah, this album, your first one, you're re-releasing these now, stands for Decibels, and that came out in early 1981. So that's in eighth grade for me. And I'm just like, I'm listening to this. I'm like, this is like looking at my life, but like something that I had never even seen or heard from, just another angle at my life. It's like, where has this been all these years? It's
Well,
really amazing.
it's been in limbo, you know. I mean, it's been off of streaming services. The only releases of Stands for Decibels and its follow-up Repercussion were directly after the band had broken up. When we were still signed, we had been signed to IRS Records, and had done one album for them, but at the same time, we sold the rights to them to release the first two, and they didn't put those out. And they finally put them out on CD after the band had broken up. I had written a piece for a book called Alt Rock-A-Rama that was edited by a dear friend, Scott Schinder, who passed away last year, and he had me write this, and it's basically called The Parallel World of the dB's. And so it's almost like looking back on that piece of fabulous journalism on my part, the
Yeah.
feeling was that every weird thing, every bad luck thing that could happen to a band, apart from mortality issues, happened to the dB's. We couldn't get a American deal until after Chris had left the band. We would do these in stores for releases after that, and the label would have lost its distribution, and so we would be signing like flats for Planet Waves by Bob Dylan. It's just like it was a comedy of errors. We got offered to open for the Kinks at Madison Square Garden, and at a show around Thanksgiving one year, but we couldn't do it because somebody in the band had to go home for Thanksgiving.
Jeez.
It's like, wow. I look back on it and I'm like, I'm actually very grateful that we're getting this sort of second shot to get some attention. And I mean, I'm glad we haven't. I'm glad our audience hasn't predeceased us for the most part. I'm glad there are going to be some younger folk out there, presumably, that are going to come to these shows that we're doing, and maybe will be something that they find something to connect with. That's what you always hope for when you make records. You don't expect to make something timeless. The word classic comes to mind, or standard, or something like that, but that's not for you to impose on somebody. You have to sort of earn it with what you do. And I think actually after 42 some odd years, these records are kind of classic, and they are kind of gold standards for that genre. I mean, they are still incredibly listenable. The songwriting, I think, holds up really well after all these decades, and I'm very proud of what we accomplished.
Yeah, but why at this moment? Why 42 years later is are these getting these re-releases? What was the idea behind that, the catalyst?
Well, there is a label in Chapel Hill called Propeller Sounds who had released a record about 2 years ago called I Thought You Wanted to Know 1978 to 1981. And what that was this archival project that had a lot of the demos that got assigned to Albion Records for the first record, and also some live stuff and some odds and sods, odds and sods by the Who, which is a lot of it's a collection of stuff that doesn't necessarily mesh together, but it's all of a time period. So they put that out, and they got a little bit of traction on that, and they thought, well, it'd be kind of cool to put these records out because they've never been out on vinyl in the United States. They've only been out on those post-mortem CDs. So they took it upon themselves to get the tracks, and they brought them to a guy named Bob Weston for mastering. We did not actually have the analog master tapes. We have lost track of where they are. We think they're in Germany, but they could be anywhere. But Bob Weston did a superlative job and has mastered. It's kind of ass backward mastering digital to analog, but he's done a beautiful job, and everybody tells me that the vinyl sounds really great. So that was sort of the plan from Propeller Sound, and we were just sort of like, okay, if that's what you want to do, sure. We
Yeah,
did,
that
I mean, we're just what else? We're not sure what else we're doing right now, so feel free to if you'd like.
yeah, why not? And it's amazing with the technology. And the thing is, though, now everybody could get their hands on it. Back in the time when you were recording, what was it, 16 tracks? I mean, you had to really work for your sound then. Nowadays, it seems like everybody's got their hands on all kinds of easy digital stuff. And yeah,
Oh
the
yeah.
talent's got to be there, but you guys really had to work for it and pay your dues.
Well, Chris, to a large degree, and Gene to a large degree, and Mitch Easter have all really they know about recording. They know about the properties of different microphones. They know about speaker placement. They know how to record. They know how to mix. They know how to blend sounds. And so they got early starts, especially Mitch and Chris, who, when we were in our high school band, Rittenhouse, had purchased TAC 2340s, which are the first user available 4-track reel to reels with the 7.5 inch reels, or 7 inch reels, sorry. And so they got an early start with this. Everybody had their little Tapco mixers, the People's Audio Company, with the spring reverb in it. And so we learned how to bounce. We learned how to put together tracks. Again, it's that whole thing of learning the songs, learning how to write the songs, learning how to arrange them so that you don't waste a lot of time messing around. I think to a degree there's good sides and bad sides to having the digital world of the unlimited tracking. And I'm sitting here in my recording studio, which is a Pro Tools studio, and so I use it, but I cannot claim to be a master of audio. I do what I do, but I'm kind of like, I see it as a kind of a glorified field recorder for me. I just I have an idea, I'll lay it down.
Yeah.
It may not
Yeah.
sound good, but it's not necessarily for public consumption anyway. But like I say, back in the day when we were at Blue Rock Studio in Soho, which is where we recorded the first album, and then also when we were at Ramport Studio in London, where we recorded Repercussion with Scott Litt as our producer, we really had the familiarity of how you do it. Chris was leading the group, as he still does, with the audio aspects of things. He knew exactly what he wanted things to sound like. I mean, it's good to have a leader in the band, which was fairly evident after Chris left. It was a much harder row to hoe because I wasn't. I don't have strong leadership qualities. I'm a good follower. I'm a good executioner, but I'm not a real leader. So we did 2 records after Chris left, one in 1984 and one in 1987, which are good records, but are entirely different. No plans to reissue those. Nobody really cares. But these first two, and I've done house concerts over the past few years and have discovered that really what people want to hear is the first stuff that they've heard you do. That the stuff that
Yeah.
made the first impression is what they really remember. So that's the stuff that they remember, the first 2 albums that the dB's put out. So we're glad to be able to bring that to people. And, we've been practicing, we've been rehearsing and trying to get things ready to go. And I think people will be very happy with what they hear. We're going to stick pretty close to arrangements that we had for the records, no extended jams. Who needs that, right? You can go see jam bands for that, but
Yeah.
we don't, that's never really been our thing. So,
Yeah, you're far tighter than that. I could see that. What's it like though trying to recreate that live now four decades later, are you finding that very challenging to hit the same kind of notes and to recreate that for the audiences of today?
Not so much. I think a lot of the rehearsal is reactivating muscle memory because we
Yeah.
played these songs for so long. We know these songs inside and out. We've all done a million things after the fact, after the dB's broke up in 1988. I had a whole other band called the Continental Drifters out in Los Angeles that did 10 years of records and touring and was a really wonderful experiment in songwriter. It was like a songwriter workshop with five or six songwriters at any given time. So and then I've done other stuff since then. Chris has done lots of records. Will played drums for Steve Earle and the Dukes for years. Gene has produced records. He's produced Yo La Tengo. He's worked in studios up in New Jersey for years. So, but when we get back together again, having grown up together, having been friends for all these years, knowing these songs intimately. I mean, when the band broke up, we did it wasn't because somebody hated anybody. We've all stayed friends. We've all worked on each other's stuff. So when we get back together again, it's sort of like, okay, well, this should be easy enough to do. And for the most part, it is. Some stuff is a little more taxing. And, we are, like I say, the arrangements are pretty much dead on what we've done. I think people want to hear it like that. I think, I played for 26 years as the keyboard player and second guitar player and mandolin player for a group
Hmm.
called Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah.
And their relationship with their audience is such that they also have kind of stayed with the arrangements from their albums. And I think that pleases their audience to no end. I don't think the audience wants to hear recalibrated, retrenched uh rearrangements for the sake of rearrangements. I get it. It's You want to keep yourself interested as well, but I think also the fact that we haven't played these songs for so long keeps the interest because we do have to sort of stay on our toes and make sure we do remember what we say we remember so clearly, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you wrote these songs obviously very young. From those perspectives, you look at these lyrics now years later and it's like, gosh, that's just a young little pup, big brown eyes, just always being very, into these love song ideas.
I have no problem with that song in particular. I think that's a nice, succinct,
Yeah.
less than 2 minute song that really accomplishes what it sets out to do. Some songs like Bad Reputation are a little cringeworthy. I mean, at 68 years old, I don't feel like singing about the new girl in school. I think that's a little questionable, and so that's fine. But there are other songs that are kind of universal. Black and White has always seemed kind of universal. Chris's songs are all really great. She's Not Worried is a gorgeous song that brings to mind the Zombies and a lot of
Right.
the Baroque pop of like the Left Bank. Chris is a really smart guy, and he's a trained musician. He studied composition at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill under a professor named Roger Hannay, who was a very good modern composer. Chris knows Charles Ives' music well. He knows he's turned me on to pieces by Prokofiev and Lucas Foss and people like that. So we are, he and I are two different kinds of songwriters. He's a little bit more how do I want to put this? I'm going to sound like I'm dissing him, but I'm not. He is a
Yeah.
lot more. He's compositional,
Sure,
and that
sure, because he was schooled.
he's
Yeah.
schooled, so
Yeah.
he knows how to assemble a song so that it does interesting things. Like a song called "I'm in Love," which is on that first record,
Yeah.
where it's got a bridge that goes through all sorts of chord changes. Now I'm a lot more simple. I'm a kind of a dumb 145 rock and roll guy. And I always have been. I mean, when we were in Rittenhouse Square and we started doing recordings, it was really easy to tell Mitch and Chris could double their vocals precisely. They were just
Oh.
exactly like what they'd sung before. Me, it's like trying to double track Howlin' Wolf. I couldn't really manage that. So I think that's a it's been a very good difference between Chris and my songwriting and singing and stuff. And um, somebody asked the other day is if there seems to be a lack of bands these days, modern bands that have two really distinct but complementary songwriters. I mean, I think that we just happen to be very fortunate. We had, like I say, we have the same vocabulary, the same building blocks that we had growing up. So even as different as we are, we do know the same references that we're trying to get across, and we know how to complement the songs that the other one has written.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a good thing.
You seem to have that Bo Diddley influence and what you come from in the day. I hear little tinges of Beach Boys, maybe tinges of the Beatles in there. Was any of that inspirational to you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The Beatles and the Beach Boys informed us tremendously, as did Big Star, as did the Kinks. You know, we we're nothing if not ardent listeners. We listen to so much stuff. Will has turned me on. Will Rigby is a great listener. He is our resident Dylanologist.
Yeah.
He knows all Dylan and gets all that stuff. I try to listen to. I think it's funny. I used to get when I there was a point where I produced records and I didn't enjoy doing it very much, but I was trying to do it. But I would start getting people would start sending me demo tapes of these power pop bands that sounded like they listened to the dB's, and I was like, well, that's cool, but it's not really anything that I want to try to reapproximate in somebody else's band. I mean, to me, I enjoy stuff like a, a Colombian drum group called Ainja, who I
Hmm.
love. It's percussion, street percussion, which is just merciless, so loud, so great. They march. I love marching band music. I
Huh.
love Qawwali music like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Stuff like
Yeah.
that. I stuff that I don't things that I can't play myself, but I can simply admire from a relative distance. And I love that because it makes me think. So, but yes, Beatles, absolutely. And when I was a 23-year-old writing those songs, you better believe it. I was highly steeped in all of that.
Yeah, nice and tight record too. I like Black and White is the featured song here and a new video produced to it. Who was in charge of that video?
I think that is something that the nice folks at Propeller Sound commissioned. I don't really know, but it's a lot of the images and uh, a lot of film from performances that we did that they were able to cobble together into that. Now there is, I realize, a video that is going to be one of the tracks for Repercussion.
Right.
It's a song called Neverland, and that is an interesting backstory on that. A friend of ours, Phil Marino, had filmed us doing Neverland, and then for some reason or other, the video never got finished. But we did end up using frames from the video several years later for the cover art for the third dB's record called Like This. So you can actually see those early pieces of the dB's. And in fact, there's a ghost image of Chris in one of them, even though Chris wasn't on their record except for on one song. But then a few years ago, our friend Jake Gorst, who had assembled the beautiful dB's website that is no longer functional, he put the put the video together for Neverland, and then he has recently colorized it as well. So that is actually going to be used as a promotion for Repercussion when that comes out later this year.
Yeah, it's a great video. And for those who are going to see this, it reminds me of my roots doing Super 8 millimeter films. It has that look.
I
And
believe it is. I believe it
yeah.
actually is Super 8. So
Yeah, it looks like it brings me back. I started doing that in 79 all the way through junior high and high school and into college. So it's just that totally brings me back. It's just totally, and then the music itself does too, as I did college radio. It's like I would have easily spun any of these records if I knew about it. And I was in Southern Ohio at the time, so they didn't really, I don't think we got very much beyond the mainstream stuff. And then, obviously the REM stuff was pretty much penetrating at that time in the 80s.
Yeah, well, we were very fortunate. We did a nice business in Champaign, Illinois. We played at Mabel's a number of times. We certainly got a lot of love in Chicago. The radio stations there were, I mean, that's as close to a hit as we ever had. It was being in Chicago, but we could fill the Cubby Bear and the Metro and loved playing there. But we played all over the place. We played Cincinnati. We played Indianapolis. The Midwest was a very big market for us in the 80s. And so I'm glad we were able to do that. We were actually heading back to Chicago in September, I believe, to the Old Town School of Music. And I think that show sold out. So, and then we'll be at Shank Hall in Milwaukee. All the tour dates are up on the dB's website, which for what it is at this point, which is thedbs.com. And it's on the landing page, so you can see it there, and it'll tell you all the shows that we've confirmed. And it's going to be fun, so we're going to play out for the rest of the year.
And first time in more than a dozen years that the group's
Yeah, we
getting back.
did some we've done some shows. We did a record in 2012 called Falling Off the Sky, and we did some shows around there, and we did some benefit performances in North Carolina, the anti-HB2 showcases. That was the bathroom bill that they were trying to make law and got that repealed,
Mm.
fortunately, when Roy Cooper came in. And but we were able to. We had a friend, Mike Allen, that got us involved in that, and so we headlined a couple of those performances. But those were amazing shows. They were just like every great North Carolina rock band got back together again, or just showed up with their gear. People like John Howie Jr. I mean, the Forest Brothers, amazing stuff. It was so great.
Hmm.
And it shows what you can do with community. You get that music community together, and it's really hard to beat. That's powerful.
Yeah. And in the remastering of this, we're getting an extra song on each of these new releases. Judy really comes to mind. That's your bonus track on stands for decibels. It's just a nice addition, even though, you look at Moving in Your Sleep as the closer track, but then you get a little something extra right after that. I could tell that sequencing seemed to be a pretty big deal when you were putting together the albums, and it's just great to see the bonus tracks getting on there. Judy's a wonderful song.
Thank you. Judy, we recorded after we had done a tour in England of behind Stands for Decibels. So it's a little bit different. We went to Nick Lowe's studio, Ampro, in London, and we recorded it with a producer that the record company had wanted us to try to work with. And it wasn't a great collaboration with the producer. I don't think he liked us very much, but we did end up with a good single. And I think that song is a really great one. It's a lot of fun to play. I'm not sure we're going to be doing it at any of these shows. I don't think we've worked that up yet, but we still have some time to see if that'll fly. So, but yeah, and I think on Repercussion we've got pH Factor, which is an instrumental, and that's a lot of fun to play. That one we have worked up, so that's always a fun one. It gives the singers a break, also.
Yeah, exactly. Not terribly long. It's not a huge piece, but yeah,
No,
that's
long enough to get your breath and maybe
yeah.
stop at a cup of water. So
Yeah, everybody needs a break in those shows. It's amazing how creative you can get, even the big legacy acts. Like first time I saw Rolling Stones was just this past year, and I'm like, oh yeah, Mick gets about 15-minute break while Keith belts out three songs. So you do need that, especially if you're jogging all over the stage like that. So
now,
I'm sure.
conversely, McCartney never takes a sip of water in the whole show, which is
I
just
know.
astonishing to me. And he's just still got that beautiful voice. And it's just like bam, 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 hit after hit, and everybody's singing along, so that's good. But I don't know what it is for Paul McCartney. It's a
It's
remarkable
incredible.
career that he's had that just allows him to do that. Plus, I mean, it's like with Brian Wilson, he's got a band that really cares about making the songs sound like they need to. You know, I mean,
Mm.
there are bands out there that will do shows and they kind of sound like they did and they kind of don't, and they kind of care and they kind of don't. I think the dB's really care about trying to sound as much like the records as we possibly can, because we did put a lot of energy into making the records, sequencing the records, as you point out.
Yeah.
That's really important. That's almost as important as recording it, making sure that the songs fall in the proper order.
Yeah, they really do. I always notice that
It's a
when I'm listening
science. It's
to
a
it. Yeah.
real science for sure.
Yeah, it is. And how does that come together? Is it more like a democracy in the band? Is the producer just listening to that, or you all come to a conclusion how things will be
It,
sequenced?
it's often a democracy. I mean, I think back on the Continental Drifters records because they were newer, but I remember cutting out song titles on small sheets of paper and just being able to kind of move them around and see, you have the key, you'd have the general tempo. You don't want to have two ballads together. You don't want to, I mean, you theoretically don't want to have a lot of songs in the same key in a row, So it will make sense. You have to take the time, you have to be considerate of how to do it, but you can make it happen. And there's something to be said about having a leader, but it's also important that everybody's voice gets heard. So some people may have different reasons for putting a song third.
When you talk about a leader, yeah, Paul McCartney was, later on became the de facto leader, and some liked it, didn't like it, but like that was the glue that kept things together, and they got a lot of work done that way. So, but
They did.
still, they were so distinctive, and as we all know, towards the end, it sounded like four solo acts in one. So that's pretty much how a lot of, many bands have done that as well.
I think so. I think that Get Back was a real eye opener,
Yeah.
especially as for somebody who had grown up on the Let It Be movie, to see that whole session reframed, and see what all the personnel dynamics and the moving of the studio around, and doing it at different places and trying stuff out, and just little bits of songs that eventually ended up on solo records that they're just messing around with. It's a very cool thing. But yeah, it's important to have somebody steering the ship. And we've been very fortunate that Chris has been such a good leader for the band.
Yeah. The one track that really stands out on my mind is your opener on your second record, Living a Lie, because you got the whole horn section there. Are
Oh
you,
yeah,
yeah. Are you
that
going to
was fun.
recreate that live?
Well, we don't have horns live, but we can make it sound really good. The horn section was the guys that played with Graham Parker and the Rumor,
Wow.
Dick Hansen and John Irish Earl. Irish also was the sax player that played on a lot of. You can find a lot of Thin Lizzy stuff where he's playing with them live. He was a great man. They actually went to the wrong studio. Also, they showed up at the wrong studio because there were a couple of different studios with the same name. So they eventually got there and cut their tracks, but it was really cool to have them play on it. It was, I'm being a music fan and being a big Graham Parker and the Rumor fan. I was just like, wow, this is really happening. How about that? So,
Yeah.
but we love that song. That's a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, very catchy. And it just adds that whole layer to it. Again, that's Beatles stuff too, who added horns. So it's really gives it another dimension as opposed to your first album.
I think the Beatles thing absolutely is in play there. Like there's a certain vibe of like from Getting Better, the
Right.
kind of the chunky octave guitar thing that's in
Yeah.
there. And but there's also stuff in there like Don't Stop the Music by Yarborough and Peoples, which was a kind of a big disco hit at the time. And so we kind of worked that into the organ line as well. We like I say, I worked in record stores for years, constantly listening to everything. I had
Yeah.
a great manager at the one that I worked at in Gramercy Park in New York that was, got me listening to a lot of the TK records, all the Casey and the Sunshine Band and Anita Ward and uh, I can't even think of Foxy, groups like that. And then he was really big into Ashford and Simpson, for example, and Marvin Gaye
Yeah.
and Hamilton Bohannon. So we listened to all that stuff. It wasn't all new wave stuff that we played. We certainly played the hell out of Armed Forces when it came out by Elvis Costello, but we also really just tried to play everything that we could in there, and it was a real learning experience for me. I was grateful to have that.
Yeah. Great track that stands out. It's one of your compositions, Amplifier. There's a little bit of humor in that one for those who might not have heard this track. And it's just so great and where it's placed in that album too on repercussion. It's just it's amazing.
Thank you. It's a little droll, I suppose. We did a video for that with the guy that invented. You're young, but you might actually remember a character named Mr. Bill that was
Oh yeah.
on
Oh yeah.
Saturday Night Live. A little clay ne'er do well that always got
Yeah.
thrashed by Mr. Hands and by Sluggo. The guy that developed that was a guy named Walter Williams, who was a friend of our manager's from New Orleans. And Walter directed a video for Amplifier. And man, it was a lot of fun to film, but it did not pass the censors at MTV. It was a little too dark for them, but it's on YouTube. You can find it there, and you can see it, and you can sort of judge for yourself. But
I'll have
that
to catch
song,
that. Yeah.
I've often said that's the song that's going to be chiseled into my tombstone. I'm afraid.
I love it. Yeah, we did a takeoff on Mr. Bill with the Play-Doh when I was a kid. I did Super 8 movies, and it's on YouTube as well. It's called Oy
Oh,
vey,
that's
Mr.
excellent.
Goldstein. So,
That's excellent.
yeah, I grew up making those Super 8s, got into visual stuff too, and I've
You
been a
still do
video.
that? You still do film?
I don't do film as much as I do like this, and
Yeah.
I'm a video editor producer by trade, so that's
Okay.
what I'm doing these days. But yeah, grew up all the way through junior high, high school, doing Super 8s, and then finally getting into video as I was in school.
That's great. You know what
Yeah.
I always wish I had, and do you know about the Fisher Price video cameras
Oh yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
used actually audio cassettes? I'd
I
love to get
remember
one.
it.
I would
Yeah.
love to get one of those, but I'm sure that those are priced through the ceiling at this point. But I just thought, what a great idea. And you could actually put it on an audio cassette, and it's going to look pretty trashed, of course. There's
Yeah.
probably some filter you can use at this point since that's the
To
kind of
mimic
going
that.
idea. But what a great thing that was for sure.
It's so funny now with the software we have, it's all non-linear. And we used to in Super 8 try to avoid having scratches on the film and things like that. Now you could just totally recreate that. But I still got the cameras, I still got the projectors.
That's so nice to have. I always think of home movies.
Oh yeah.
My family's home movies, which if I was a good archivist, I would have transferred one of these days, and so hopefully I will. But I haven't at this point.
Yeah, you could hand that all over to a company now and they could directly get it into digital, which,
You
you're
take it to
saving yourself.
Costco.
Yeah.
Although I don't know whether that's the smartest thing to do in the world, but what are you going to do? It's
Usually it
available.
works.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and the way that they were able to unearth your material. Were you ever on MTV a lot? Were you on that 120-minute show? I remember that was very big
We
when I
were
was.
on the Cutting Edge, which was
Yeah.
IRS Records show. And Will and I were on there once. I think they might have tried to play amplifier on that. We didn't really, again, we didn't have a lot of leeway to do videos. We didn't have bankroll to do anything at that point. 1984, and it was a kind of a whole new ball game. And so we tried. We actually stuck amplifier on that third album to see if that would, what is it, tie the pork chop to the kid's leg to get the dog to play with it. I mean, we
Yeah.
again we're just trying to get some attention. And we just didn't have anybody that was willing to go out there and do anything. There is, I will say, there were some intrepid NYU film students that did a video for Living a Lie,
Mm.
which we didn't ever think anything ever happened with. We never heard anything more from it. We filmed it. That was it. We never saw anything. But then a few years ago, what should pop up on YouTube but the Living Alive video? So you can actually see that there too. It's a
Oh,
little weird, you know. And then eventually, when we were assigned to IRS, we did have a video that Julia Hayward, who had done the Burning Down the House video for Talking Heads, she did one for a song of mine called Working for Somebody Else, which I think is also maybe up there. But that was a kind of a cool thing as well. So, but we just didn't, you know, again, we didn't have a lot of inroads into MTV, which was a shame. We did get played a bit on a local video channel up in New York. It was like a UHF channel, and people would see stuff up there. They saw the amplifier video there, and I would get letters from people who had seen it, you know. But ultimately, the video revolution kind of passed us by. Unfortunately,
yeah.
I wish we'd been able to take more, have a little bit more uh, inroads into that than we did. But
Yeah, it had its time, but even by like the late 80s, MTV was already veering into other programming and the remote control game show, and then it got into the reality stuff in the 90s. So that was the beginning of the end for, an actual music video station. When that
yeah,
started, I was like,
what's
yeah,
the meme that says celebrating 25 years of MTV, 10 years of great music videos?
yeah,
You
it's
know,
really what it was. Yeah,
kind of, sort
totally.
of, yeah. I mean, the other thing I always thought was interesting was when you looked at like the Nashville network when they would show videos on the MTV, they would show the director of the video, but on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Nashville network, they would show the songwriter credits. And to me, as a songwriter, that meant an awful lot. So that was kind of neat.
Yeah, yeah, very much. Well, what a great combo of your sound is just, this is pre REM, which, me growing up, that was what I was really into. So this was just a great find when I was told to listen to some dB's albums, and I'm just ever grateful. I'm definitely converted and really into it. So I can't wait to see
Thank
you
you.
guys
And
live.
we're happy to have you on board with us, you know. Better late than never, right? So
Absolutely.
and we're back for your listening pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you at the show in Decatur.
Absolutely. I'll be there. I'll be there to say hi, and hopefully I see you right before the show as well.
Fantastic. That'd be great.
Take care. Have a good one. Thanks for stopping by.
You too. Thanks for having me on the show.
Take care. Bye-bye. Wasn't that awesome? He's really, really cool. Really enjoyed it. Some people are very inspirational to me, and he's definitely one of them. He's a really talented guy, and I'm excited that they're getting back there out on the road, and people hopefully will discover them, and they should get the recognition that they really do. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you, hear from you soon.